Yeah, I mean, if she had had a termination of pregnancy on the Sunday, Monday or Tuesday, she'd be alive today. And that's a fact. Now, there were undoubtedly mistakes made in the way she...
A whole plethora of pain and suffering that was brought upon women in this country cannot continue. And if these women upstairs represent anything in this country, it will not continue. Because despite her advocate legislation and taking to touch, this fight goes in the...
But they're asking you, there's the possibility here of unleashing something on your country. And I want you to understand exactly what we're talking about.
And there are women who have children already, and they just cannot afford to have any more children.
On the 7th of September 1983, the Eighth Amendment to the Constitution of Ireland was approved by referendum. 1 month later, the amendment was signed into law. According to the Constitution, the state acknowledges the right to life of the unborn, and with due regard to the equal right to life of the mother, guarantees in its laws to respect, and as far as practicable, by its laws to defend and vindicate that right. In other words, the Eighth Amendment ensures that abortion is illegal in Ireland unless the life of the mother is under immediate threat. Since its instatement, it has frequently sparked debate, but in the last 5 years there has been a huge resurgence in discussions on the Eighth Amendment that has led to a polarisation across Ireland. On one side, those in favour of the Eighth, on the other, those who want to repeal it.
I'm on this side because I view the fact that we are women and anyone with a womb in Ireland isn't allowed an abortion, I view that as a healthcare issue, because I feel that that is a very, very vital healthcare procedure that we are denied. Having abortions save lives, but they can save both your physical and your mental health, and it's just such an important procedure that so many people get, not just because they're pregnant and it's accidental and stuff like that. It's something that it saves lives, and I feel it's wrong that that's not an option here, that people have died because of the Eighth Amendment, and I feel that that just isn't addressed enough.
I faced a crisis pregnancy when I was 19, and I think if the Eighth Amendment hadn't been in place in Ireland, then I don't think my daughter would be alive, because if it only, I was so upset initially when I found out that if I only had to drive myself 10 minutes in the road, I don't think there would be a Holly. I don't think she'd be alive. In a difficult situation, when you get news, you don't think rationally about something, you act, and you might regret it afterwards. And what regret would I have, if I hadn't had Holly, and what would the pro-choice movement console me with, that it was my choice?
First tonight, the growing controversy over the tragic death of Savita Halappanavar in Galway University Hospital. Just 24 hours after it was announced, the HSE inquiry into her death is in disarray. Her husband, Praveen Halappanavar, is still calling for a public inquiry, and this despite the changes in the investigation team. It's not at all clear whether or not he, as one of the chief witnesses, will participate with any HSE inquiry.
In October of 2012, a 31-year-old Indian woman by the name of Savita Halappanavar was admitted to Galway University Hospital. Savita, who was 17 weeks pregnant and said to be in agonising pain due to complications, was denied an abortion after numerous requests, although she was told that a miscarriage was inevitable. Savita Halappanavar subsequently died of organ failure caused by septicemia in the days following her miscarriage.
I think, from what I can remember, I think it was what happened with Savita Halappanavar back in, what year was that? I can't even remember what year it was, but I think that was, we know now that the inquest reports and the coroner reports found that she died of mismanaged sepsis, and that it had nothing to do with receiving an abortion. But that wasn't really put out there in the media after they said that she died because she wasn't allowed an abortion. But I think in my mind anyway, that's when the ball started rolling for the changing the abortion laws.
I went to a Catholic secondary school, and we had a religion class. It was in TY, and it was a class of morality, so they brought up that case. And even at the time, I wouldn't have labelled myself pro-choice, but even when I look back now, it kind of shows where I was standing even then. I mean, that was when it was first kind of brought to the public conscious, I think. And for me at the time, I was going through that teenage rebellion stage of no, I'm completely anti-religion, but I confused atheism with being anti-Catholic, which is essentially what I was at the time. And I like to say I'm not anti-Catholic now, but at the time I was very no, I hate all religion, all this kind of stuff. So then when it came down to this debate, my big kind of problem that I had with what had happened with Savita, apart from the fact that, you know, obviously she was just treated horribly, was the wording as well, which many people have commented on. You know, for a nurse to turn around and say, oh, we can't do that, we're a Catholic country, it just really riled me up, especially since, I mean, I don't know if people are aware, but De Valera, when he made the Constitution, never actually said that we're a Catholic country. He said that the majority of people are Catholic and that the Catholic Church has a special place within Ireland, but they never explicitly stated that we as a country are Catholic, because he knew even then, you know, for all the man's problems, he knew even then that, you know, there's still Protestants, you know, there's Jews, there's Muslims living in Ireland even then, so...
The tragedy was met with an uproarious response from both pro-choice and pro-life campaigners. The former using the case to highlight what they perceived as fatal ambiguities in the abortion legislation of Ireland, the latter writing this off as exploitation to further a pro-choice agenda.
I was up in Dublin yesterday for the strike for appeal, and like everywhere there was just people in black. I mean, I passed a woman and she had free, safe and legal. Okay, abortions, they're never free because someone ends up paying for them. And she was walking by and she passed me and she had her little boy and he had her body, her choice vote on a cape on his back. That's what was in Dublin yesterday. There was a picture of me and Holly and we were spat at by pro-choice people. I mean, that is not the signal you want to be giving off, because if I was on the fence with the abortion issue, I'd look at the 40,000 people that rallied up in Dublin for the Marches for Life. And if I saw the difference between, like, they have so much joy and there's children and they're happy, and then you come to this other side and they're just shouting and cursing and roaring abuse at people. I mean, if you were in the middle there, you know, I think I'd be more inclined to go with the pro-life side. But like that, we can all be better as well at the way we approach things. Like, I know some groups that come up with, you know, the baby, you know, the aborted baby parts on, you know, on a big, you know, banner thing, and that doesn't work, because no, you know, it's, could you imagine a woman having abortion regret, you know, a woman that had really regretted her abortion and come to terms with her decision, and then seeing that, like, I mean, that could really have a bad impact on somebody. We need to be compassionate, like, towards everyone, you know, in whatever side of the debate they're at. I mean, we don't use, you know, the harsh language or we try not to anyway. And yeah, I think it's compassion that needs to be shown, you know, to protect the 8th Amendment in Ireland. Like, you need to get the truth out there, but in a, you know, in a proper way.
I think both sides have been pretty nasty. And I don't think that it's fair to say that, you know, we've always been, you know, very kind, because we can give it back as good as we get it. But in saying that, like 95% of the time, pro-choice people are across the board very lovely and very, you know, very diplomatic about things. You know, I'm not going to go up to someone if they're handing out pro-life leaflets and spit on them, which is the reality of what, you know, pro-choice people do, like, deal with every day.
The vast majority of people in the country have a stance on the topic, and within that bracket, opinions can differ wildly. For some, it's an issue of politics. For others, the lack of access to safe and legal abortion is a healthcare violation.
I think there's a significant role for doctors to be involved in this debate, because it is basically a health issue. It's not really a political issue. It's not really a legal issue. It's a health issue. And it's a health issue like any other gynecological, contraceptive, reproductive health one. And so, yes, it's appropriate that doctors are in the debate for that. And we would argue that really we're the only ones who should be in the debate. It should be between women and their doctors or their healthcare providers, not necessarily just doctors. Now, of course, that's not the way it works in Ireland. Historically, it was religious dominated in terms of the debate, and then it became very much legally dominated. And now there is a much bigger move that it's a medical issue, which is a good one.
Since 2012, there have been many talks and debates held in the Dáil about the divisive nature of the 8th Amendment, along with several attempts at writing and passing legislation that would replace or improve the amendment itself. The Protection of Life During Pregnancy Act 2013 ensures that abortion is allowed when pregnancy puts the life of the mother at risk, including in cases of suicide. Suicide up until this point was highly debated as a reason to have an abortion. However, the bill itself is not highly regarded by either side of the abortion debate. Pro-choice see it as too restrictive, pro-life regard it as not restrictive enough.
They've got this, the Citizen Assembly has been going on now for the past couple of weeks, and next month I think it will be releasing its concluding answer, and that's giving us the impression that, like, it'll give kind of all Ireland the impression that there's something happening, that something's actually happening with the debate, but at the end of the day, the TDs aren't interested in it. So while we're given this impression that something's happening because of the Citizens Assembly, the people that can actually make the difference, they're just not interested in it. So nothing's really happening, to be honest.
I think there could be a really, really good debate if both sides were given an equal, share in the media. The strike for appeal was on up in Dublin. Every news channel covered it, like even the BBC came over for it. And we got, I think it was 30 seconds, the pro-life campaign got a 30-second clip in at the end of it. But the reporters had shown up because it was, a pro-choice event. And back in November when we launched the Love Both campaign, to protect the 8th Amendment, no one, RTE, TV3, no radio stations, no one showed up. So it's, to make an informed decision for anyone, like, they need to hear, an equal side, like, you need to hear both sides properly.
No matter what side you're on, there's a worrying amount of misinformation circulating on the topic, leaving a lot of people in the dark. With very little attention afforded to the subject in schools, many end up looking to unreliable sources for facts. All this hearsay and rumour means that a considerable number of people involved in the debate aren't clear on what's true and what isn't.
I can't actually say because I don't know 100%. I've heard different things. You hear different stories on social media, and I've seen things going up on Facebook that I feel there's certain things that go with scaremongering people, like where they get a forceps and they clamp the baby's head and blah, 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 and it gets very, very graphic. And I feel like those things are out there to kind of frighten people.
There's two types, isn't there? So there's the actual physical operation, and then there's the pills. To be honest, with the actual operation, I haven't really researched it. In terms of the pills, it's like getting a very bad period, I suppose.
I know from listening to Dr. Anthony Levitino, he used to perform abortions, but he doesn't anymore. And he's on the pro-life side of the debate very much now. But he describes like the ripping away of the parts, during a late-term abortion when the head is crushed and when each body part is brought out, the legs, the arms, and then the vacuum kind of sucks the baby out. But earlier abortions, I know it isn't as graphic, but it's it's still ending a human life. So, but that's what I know.
Different types of abortions obviously have different procedures, and it all depends on what time in the gestation, i.e. in the length of the pregnancy you're at. And pregnancy is considered to be 40 weeks, and the vast majority of abortions take place before 12 weeks. And in most countries, the law changes at 12 weeks, so the method changes a bit as well. So in a medical abortion, which is now becoming the most common, and in the UK, about 65% of abortions are medical abortions. And by medical, it's meant that you take tablets. The alternative is a surgical abortion, which would have been the more traditional type, and that implies that you're having a procedure and that instruments are used. So in a medical abortion, up to about 11, 12 weeks, the fetus size will vary from the tip of your fingernail through to about that size. So the very small, so that, no bigger than a small matchbox. What's done in a medical abortion is you take 2 sets of tablets. You take mifepristone, which separates out the fetus and the placenta from the lining of the uterus, from the womb. So it separates. And then you take a second tablet called misoprostol, which makes the uterus contract. That's a prostaglandin. And it basically causes the abortion by expelling the fetus. And that's how it works. Up to 12 weeks, you'd be looking at the equivalent of a heavy period and the equivalent sort of cramping that goes with it. Few enough side effects. Sometimes, it mightn't be fully passed. And one of the important things is that the end of the pregnancy is confirmed by a negative pregnancy test. In a surgical abortion, then, it's a different procedure. A long piece of like a very narrow straw, like a cocktail straw but long, is inserted through the neck of the womb, and a suction is applied to it, and the contents are effectively sucked out. And that's how it works, and it happens quite easily at an early stage of pregnancy.
I'd hope that if it did come in and the people who truly believed they needed it and that they would get the right aftercare, and that it would be done way better than how the rest of the health system is working at the moment. And my fear is that it'll be too easily accessed.
I don't think people really joined the dots properly. I mean, how many women had booked abortions or thought about abortion like what I did, and they didn't go through with it because the 8th Amendment ultimately, stopped. I mean, what really stopped me was I was chatting to a woman in England in an abortion clinic, and then I realised my passport was out of date, so I couldn't go. I didn't have it booked, but I was so close to booking it until I realised, I physically couldn't travel. And there's plenty more girls, that were in my situation that didn't go. And I think, obviously my hope and my dreams for the future would be to keep the 8th Amendment, because it protects both mothers and babies in Ireland, and it's the last right to life in our constitution, and it should be so protected.
I hope we get a referendum date, and I hope that Ireland is ready for that, in terms of that there's enough people there that want the change, that people actually realise that, it's more than just, a 14-year-old going having an abortion because it's like contraception, that it's actually a healthcare issue, it's a human rights abuse, that people realise that this is something so vital, and we've been pushing it under the rug because people can travel to England, but that it shouldn't be like that anymore, that it actually should be something we can get in our home country.
The Citizens' Assembly will be finalising and handing its report on the 8th Amendment to an Oireachtas committee sometime in the first half of this year. However, the Assembly's findings effectively count for nothing, as they themselves cannot affect any change in the law. Some see the Assembly as a means of testing the waters in regards to abortion laws in Ireland. Any possible referendum to repeal the 8th Amendment cannot be held until 2018 at the earliest, under a compromise reached by the Dáil, and some expect it not to be held until the latter half of that year.
I think the Citizens' Assembly was a delaying tactic, and I think what it's discussing is very minimal to really what's required by women in this country. But that will then report back to a committee, a special committee that's going to be set up in the Dáil to discuss the findings, and then eventually something will be brought in front of the Dáil. But that could be next year by the time all of that happens, which means that we're into things like the Pope's visit next year, but also potentially even a general election next year. So we don't know if this issue will get dealt with by this Dáil.
For now, the future of abortion legislation in Ireland is uncertain. No matter which side you're on, however, the one thing on which everyone can agree is that the situation can't stay the way it is.
When there's so much going at the minute for the repeal of the 8th across the country, that I don't see how they could ignore people's voices and not let it happen.
All across Ireland, millions of people hope for a change.
Shada Yar Cheslam